Wonderful. So what I'll do, I'll get stuck into this, but before I get stuck into the webinar, I'll just give a quick heads up of who we are as a company, first of all. So hopefully my slides are sharing. So a quick intro to Avolution. So we've been leading in the enterprise architecture industry for over 20 years now. And yeah, got 7 offices worldwide. And obviously, most importantly for us, we are the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave, working in over 100 countries with over 3,000 clients. So keeping ourselves nice and busy there. A little bit of an introduction to the webinar today. So as Peter mentioned, going to be looking at all things to do with enterprise architecture states. And I'll be taking you through some different examples as we go along. And there's going to be plenty of time for audience participation. So prepare yourselves to answer some polls as they come through. Not too many, so don't worry, you're not going to get RSI with your fingers at all. And I'll be demonstrating some of these concepts in Abacus as we get towards the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's kick off. So let's start off by exploring what we actually mean by state and the various types of state that there are and the differences between them. And despite the title of this webinar, we're not actually referring to a particular location within America. What we're meaning by state, in the context of enterprise architecture at least, is viewing your organization and its data and artifacts from a particular point of view. And through this presentation, we're going to be looking at different states of architecture styles grouped into 3 main categories. And they are the timeline category, a working category, and analysis. So 3 categorized states that we'll be diving into. And we'll be exploring the main benefits of using each type of state and specifically the benefits that they can provide to you and your organization. As I mentioned, going to be demonstrating this in Abacus as we go along towards the end of this presentation. So to start with, we're going to look at the timeline states. And this is where I'm going to get you involved from the off. And I've got a question that I'm going to be asking you all. It's going to be a quick question. And I'm going to give you no longer than 10 seconds to answer it once I actually launch the poll. So get your clicking finger ready to choose A, B, C, or D. And as strange as it might seem, there is method to this madness. So the question is, which dot will make it out of the maze successfully? So I'm just going to launch the first poll now. So hopefully that's come through, and I'm going to bring that maze up onto the screen. So there we go. We've got dot A, B, C, and D. I'm going to leave that poll open for a little while. So hopefully you all can answer. I can see some coming in. Wonderful. I'll leave that open a little longer. Lots coming in. That's great. So give you a little bit more time. I'm going to stop that in 5 seconds though. So 3, 2, and 1. I'm just going to hit end on there. So apologies if you didn't get cut, didn't get a chance. So if I share the results, we can see like there's a favorite there, C, but there's also quite a few in the others, A, B, and D. And I kind of expected that because ultimately, how could you know? You know nothing about this maze. You don't know which dot's going to go where. So I'll just stop sharing that. So let's just have a look where they go. Hopefully that's going to run. Away we go. And 70% of you are actually right. You've got C. But obviously, not everyone's got that correct. It was a bit of a guess, I'm sure. And if you're telling me that you figured that out through any intelligence, I don't quite believe you. So, right, we've seen that. And we've got another question, and it's exactly the same question. It's exactly the same scenario. So again, I'm launching that question once more. So you've got the same question. Let's bring the maze back up. So which one is going to get out of the maze successfully? And like I say, if remember, it's the exact same one. So interesting range of answers coming through. And I'm going to leave that a little longer. And let's end that poll there. Hopefully that clicks. And with a slight increase, I'm not too sure why we've got some guesses for A, B, and D, because as I said, it is the exact same scenario. So hopefully we should have learned that C has come through. And I would expect more people to get an increase in the correct answer. So we've still got 73%. And you're probably thinking, well, we probably could have guessed that the second time around. It, well, for 73% view was quite obvious. And that is actually the point. Like, we learn from our previous experiences, and that's what we do every day in work, albeit with more complex scenarios than watching a maze run twice. And we're learning from our past successes and our past failures. And what it helps us to do is answer questions and design what we want to do going forward. So we need to learn from the past, regardless of it, if it's a success or a failure. And that's precisely what we end up doing when we start modeling different timeline states. So I'm just going to start considering how we apply this outside of our world of enterprise architecture. And we're going to have a look at it from the automotive industry. So let's take this Audi, for example, that's on the market today. It's something current, but how did it become to be this particular product that is purchased by so many people around the world? Talented designers, no doubt. Talented mechanics, absolutely. And countless other talented professionals to make this a reality. But that is the who. It's not the how. They knew how to get this to this point by knowing what has happened already. What have they done historically? So they would have learnt what has been a success and what hasn't, and what trends that they've already seen, whether that's a marketing trend, sales trend, pricing trend, design. All of this actually helps them to get to the point where we are today and into today's product. Unsurprisingly, we use the exact same methods to help us plan and design what we're going to do in the future. And it allows us to see what's feasible. It allows us to see what is also not feasible. And to be frank, anything that's new and unknown. Because what that allows us to do is start viewing potential risks with all those new features going forwards. So how could timeline states be a benefit to you guys? Well, the summary of this is like, it's quite obvious. You can look back from where you've come from. You can get your lessons learned. Rather than going at things blind, look where you've come from and figure out what has worked well and what hasn't, and apply that to your thinking, your modeling in the now. And apply that thinking to looking forward. Look at the different future states that you could have. Just because you planned something in the future doesn't mean that it has to happen. Look at where the fail points could be. And then what you're able to do is actually compare those different future states with where you currently are. Help you and your organizations make decisions on what direction to take. You might take elements of one future state and elements of another. You can have many different future states that you plan. Doesn't mean you have to go with any of them 100%. Okay, so moving on now to the working states. And I've got another activity for you guys. So the question is here, how many colored blocks are there? I'm just going to launch the poll and let's bring the image onto the screen. There we go. Lovely bit of Lego. Answer away. How many different colored blocks can you see? We'll leave that on for a few more seconds. I'm hopefully giving everyone enough time just to click away. And unsurprisingly, I'm getting a lovely range of answers that I can see on here, and I'll share with you shortly. And I'll leave that for another 5 seconds. I think we've got quite a few answers in. So I'm just going to hit end on that poll there. Again, apologies if you've not managed to select one. But if I share those results, unsurprisingly, we've got a lovely range of answers. And I'm going to make an assumption here that no one is going to bet their house that they got the right answer on this. And I'll be completely honest, I don't have a clue how many different colors are on of colored blocks are in this picture. My time, fortunately, is spent better than counting that on this picture, but that actually represents what we often see in today's working environment, especially within enterprise architecture. But before I move on to that, I'm just going to stop sharing, and we're going to ask the same question, but we're going to put a different perspective on this. So same question again, how many different colors can we see? So I'm just going to launch the next poll, and let's bring on the original view. There it is, horrible. But let's look at the second perspective. How many color blocks now? And all of a sudden people start changing their answers, and there we go. It's a resoundingly easier question to answer. So let me let that go for another few seconds. Got the majority. So, and we end the poll. Share that result. And yes, we've got 6. And if anyone's questioning, saying, well, actually, black and white aren't colors, Nick, they're shades, I'm going to rise above that. But yeah, you're right. We've got 6 different colors in this perspective. And whilst I know it's not exactly the same scenario, but we get hopefully getting the idea of where I'm going to with this. So I'll just stop sharing this and we move on. So if any of you have been involved in any training that either I deliver or any of the other Abacus Avolution, consultants, hopefully you'll remember that we don't half bang on about the different perspectives or lenses that you can apply within a single architecture. And that could be a financial perspective, it could be your life cycle perspective, or maybe a particular metric focused perspective. And this is to let whoever is consuming your data not to get lost in the quagmire that is all of the data that you've gathered and processed in the entirety of the enterprise architecture activities that you undertake. It enables them to focus on the information and analytics that matter to them. And we're breaking the information down into smaller chunks to be easily digested. And the reality is that's exactly the same when it comes to you here and now building and managing your repositories and looking at the different states. We've already explored how we can use different architectures to model different points in time as a whole. But as I've mentioned, that whole architecture can be very, very complex. We can start using working state architectures to let us focus on specific areas depending on that particular need. And that could be from a particular domain, such as an application view or process area, or even technology. Or it could be that you just want a separate staging area in your project that allows you to add another layer of security to review and review any updates before moving them into the live architecture that could be viewed by your wider organization. That is actually something we see quite a lot in Avolution at the moment. And again, I'm actually going to bring this back to cars, and you'll notice that theme as we go through this today. Now, we've got our lessons learned from a historic view. We know what our current view needs to look like. In this case, it's in the form of a lovely red Jag. But how does it come together? Unsurprisingly, from multiple working states, by teams focusing on their specific working areas. In this case, we've got the chassis, got the body, and we've got the engine, all of which will have been worked on separately to get them to a more complete state before we actually bring them together to get bolted into the car to make this complete product. So just summarizing why these could be important to you, again, it's allowing you to add that control of a focus for any particular teams or maybe even individuals to focus on their line of work without the distractions of other scenarios that impact their decision making. It lets them have that honed in view. As I mentioned, you can have that work in progress state. It does add another level of pre-go live checks, essentially. So what I'll plug our next presentation by our client Telsona. That's something that they'll be exploring much more in our next session later this afternoon, but looking at how you can have different stages of work in progress, get that work in, ratify it, QA it, make sure it's suitable for wider publication to your stakeholders. And it allows for the specialized projects as well. So whilst projects can be viewed in a similar vein to the future state, you might want to really strip that back and have it just focused on a particular scenario that you're trying to run through. And that takes us to the analysis states. No activities this time, but yes, I brought it back to cars. This time we've upped the ante and I'm going for a Formula One example. And we're going to look at how we can apply analysis state thinking to this particular F1 car. So in F1, we know that there's a lot of science and research that goes into all aspects of the race car. In order to analyze all of the intricacies of what makes up this car, you can't simply look at one complete item to determine what is performing well and what isn't. The analysis will focus on specific parts of its makeup, whether that's the straight line speed that the engine allows it to create, or the level of downforce that is generated by the different wings and vents on the body, or even the durability of each tire compound. Now, these are just three high level views. I know there's a lot more that goes into the workings in F1 car, but looking at specific analytical areas. And I've seen a few names on this audience list, and I know there's a few of our existing clients on here, so it's great to have you on. And I know you're probably thinking, well, surely we can just run the analysis in our live current state. And you're right, it's a fair question. You'll be pleased to hear, though, that you're not doing anything wrong there. Running algorithms and simulators within your live architectures is more than okay. We really do actively encourage it. So they're there to help you to get the insights needed to help your organizations make intelligent decisions. So we're not telling you to stop that at all. The idea of utilizing a different architecture for analysis is to isolate an area separate from your live data to allow quickfire tests of scenarios, preventing any inadvertent domino effect to other areas of your repository that you may not want to impact as part of your test. So for example, other users, like Tim was talking earlier about algorithms, they might have built algorithms or scripts that automatically operate, and you don't want your test to actually trigger that and have that knock-on impact to live data that your audience is actually working with. And even if you intend to just work in the live architecture, not save any changes, I'm speaking from my own mistakes and my own learnings here. It's so easy to get carried away with testing algorithms against different scenarios to see the various outcomes. And then before you know it, you're moving on to doing something else that you do need to save. You're working on live data, you're modeling something, diagramming something. And before you know it, you save into your project and your testing is saved with that. So learning from this, we can prevent ourselves getting this skewed data. And just following on, why would this be important to you? Hopefully it's clear, but I'm just going to hit some more points before I start showing this in Abacus. So you get to run your existing simulations or analytics in the form of algorithms or scripts on specific areas. It allows you just to, again, we're honing in, we're focusing on one particular area, allowing you to look at small changes, run it, see what it does. If you don't like it, we change it. Let's look again. And it helps you get to a point that, right, this is the scenario going forward that works. Let's bring that into our live architecture. You get to try out new analysis methods risk-free. So using this isolated area, build different algorithms, try something new, use the different properties in this analytical architecture to see what you could report on, rather than having to just do any calculations outside of Abacus or out. You can actually try all this directly in the tool. And ultimately, it allows you to do this safely and avoid that domino effect that you can quite easily do should you get carried away working in the live architecture, testing out different scenarios, as I mentioned before. So that's all on my slides. What I'm actually going to do now is take you into Abacus to actually show these in action. I know that's probably what most of you are actually here to see. So I've given you the theory. Let's see it in action now. So hopefully you can see my Abacus screen. If not, if someone will just let me know. I've just opened Abacus Studio here. And what you can see on the left-hand side, I'm in my production state, and I've got different architectures, so different states that I can work with. So I've got some future states, some timeline states here. I've got a historic version, I've got a working state, another different working state by looking at the domain and analysis architecture. But to start with, we're looking at our current state. I'm just going to go to this strategies catalog. And hopefully you've all noticed that there's quite a few items that are highlighted in purple on this one. And what I can do is hover over here and show that it's comparing to this historical architecture. I can start looking at, in this case, it's just showing my costs. I can see that the business innovation strategy in my historic version, it doesn't give me a date on the historic version. I might want to actually change that, say, well, this could have been June 2021, where the cost was 286,000, nearly 287,000. This year, however, we've shaved a few thousand off that. So we can see where we've moved from. Moving to the applications catalog, a few more different colors being displayed here and a few more changes. This one actually comparing to this IVR upgrade project. We can see that it's got a name change, for example, the comparison value in that future state. It's just taken that AKA IVR, it's just interactive voice response. I can see here that we're upgrading it from 3.0 to 4.0. I can see that we're changing connections to processes. So it's no longer going to be connected to manage customer service requests and inquiries. It's going to, it's quite example there because it's exactly the same. This one is actually going to be manage strategic initiatives. So we can start to see the different changes based on those different timelines. I can quite easily change that to view the application rationalization project, see what's different. Not as many changes, but it's still indicating a few on there. So that's the timeline state. I'm not going to spend too much longer on that. Hopefully that's nice and straightforward. And again, just a reminder, do throw any questions into the Q&A section. We'll be covering them as soon as I've wrapped up here. But moving on now to the, actually, I'm staying on the timeline because I just want to display something in Abacus Enterprise. So this is where we can actually see them side by side. We're actually looking at our production versus that application rationalization project. We can see that the cost of my applications, I'll just hit this on here so you can see that it's showing my aggregated cost. Currently 478 million. We're spending a lot here, whereas the application rationalization is 472 million. Granted, still a lot of money, but it's still 6 million less than where we currently are. And we can see the reduction in application count. Now you can set these up to show whatever metrics between the different states of architecture that you wish. This is just an example that we have provided. Moving back onto Abacus Studio, I'm just going to take us into the working state. So you can see at the moment I'm logged in as myself. I'm actually just going to switch user to show how this could be done practically. And hopefully you can see it. Now I've logged in as this working state. All of these items are grayed out, but the working state, and that's because it's all read-only to me. I've got permissions to do my work in this working state. I can't impact the live data that could be going out to Abacus Enterprise and being shown to the wider organization. So let's make some changes into that catalog that we looked at before. So I'm just going to actually filter on here. So I've just got my Australian applications. I might want to just change a few of these values. So let's say I've got Abacus here. I know Abacus, I'm moving that to version 9. CRM, we're going to move that to, that's going to be a 4 criticality, and I'm actually going to upgrade the DR provision just because I feel like it. I'm just going to make a few little changes there, not a problem. And you can see this is highlighting everything that's changed, and it's basing it on the comparison state. I can hide that. I don't need to know that from that working state. I can save that. That's my work done. I've done my planning, and that's my changes made in here. And let's switch, save that, and I'll switch back to myself in my users. So I come in as the main administrator. I'm responsible for my live architectures. Let's take a look at my applications catalog to see what's been updated in the working state. So again, clicking on this drop down, if my mouse plays ball, and you can see it's highlighted all of the areas that have been updated. So I can easily accept these by right-clicking on an individual and syncing that to what it's been changed to. So if I do that, you'll see it updates, and it's actually disappeared in terms of being an amendment. And you can hover over it as we saw before. This is quite a small scale of change. If and when you have quite a lot, what you are able to do is actually run a difference report, which I'll just demonstrate. So you're able to right-click on your architectures and run a diff report. And what that's looking at, I'm going to select my working state only and remove the other items. And I'm going to change the direction because I'm looking to bring in from my architecture, in this case, the working state, to the sync target, which is my production environment. Don't select this one, this keep recommended, because it will change items that it's suggesting to keep. And I'll hit generate. And what you should see is a report comes up. Comparison value demonstrating what's been changed in the working state based on my current value. Same principle, I can right click and sync, or if I'm confident enough, I go through every change, I can actually right click and synchronize all of them in one go. Remove that and we'll see now in my current state, all of those changes in the working environment have been accepted. So just sticking with this for this view for a little while longer, that can be the same for our diagrams. So if I go back into the working state, I'm going to stay as myself for the time being. And I'm just going to go to this particular diagram here in my working state. I'm actually going to go into the application states, something a little different. So I've basically stripped back what is in here. I'm only showing the applications. Doesn't impact anything else. I've just got that focus. What I can do is start actually creating connections in the diagram. That's fine. And again, you'll probably put a bit more thought into what you're connecting here, but I'm going to add a new application to my data domain. So let's add in something brand new so we can see it live. So that's new. It's not got any colors to it, it's not got a property, but I'm going to make some connections there. Great. I've done that in a working state. what I'm able to do is actually take this diagram and move it into my current state. So if I just paste, I'll actually put it in the webinar folder, paste that here, and what you'll see is it prompts me to merge the existing content with the existing elements. So it prevents duplication. So there it is. We've already got one that's got the copy of, because it's got the same name as something we've already got, but I'll open that. And there is that diagram now in my current state. And you'll see that has now been added into my data domain, and the existing items that were there all along are there and actually just now connected to the different items. So you've created the connections, created new components, and we've done that by moving diagrams from one state to another. And lastly, I'm going to come on to the analysis states now. So I'm just going to open this particular view, and it's just going to open on my second screen. So bear with me whilst I'll bring that back onto the shared screen. Hopefully we can all see that. I'm just going to turn off the comparison for now. And we've got the diagram. You can see it's highlighting changes. Again, I'm just going to turn the comparison off for the time being. What I'm going to do is look at a particular scenario. What we can see here are the applications with a business fit score, which is automated by an algorithm, criticality scores, which can be automated, not in this particular example I'm going through, and we've got numbers of users. We've also got these time gradings, again, automated based on various algorithms. And that's what we're going to look at. What if we want to change some of these scenarios? I'm actually going to step into one of these algorithms. In this case, just the business fit score. And I actually don't need to see all of the items that it works with. I just want to actually view, rather than run it on every architecture, I'm going to run it on the analysis one, the one that I'm currently in. So let's say I'm going to change some of these gradings again. I've decided that the CMDB, actually, we're reducing that rating, and we're reducing the number of people that have access to it, because we've brought all of our data into Abacus. Why not? I can see there's actually data missing. These two items don't have a criticality, and I know that feeds into this grading. So let's actually set some of these up. And what we can do, we can see if I actually compare now, it'll highlight those changes and that I'm doing. And what I'm able to do is, if I just actually exaggerate one of these users by quite a lot, what we can see is if I run this algorithm, there's all the results. I'll not go into any details on that, but you can see where the actual business fit is upgraded based on this particular algorithm. I can then have another algorithm that runs that sets the suggestion. So I can see when I'm changing this scenario, these items based on my few changes here have updated. So hopefully you can see all that. You can do that as many times as you need to actually look at, well, what if we increase the number of users of our ERP application? What if we reduce the criticality rating based on our CMDB and reduce down the number of users? Does that actually look right? Actually, possibly not. Let's actually keep this high. Let's run that once more. And let's run to set the suggestion once more. And hopefully we'll see it's now gone up to refresh my grade despite the low users, because it's highly critical. Once I've done all that, we can synchronize back into our live environment and can actually save the algorithm to run live. And just taking us back to the slides, that's everything that I'm going to run through. And just a final summary of the items that we've considered today. And it's only fair that if I call something the United States of Architecture, that I bring up the United States map. But we've considered the different timeline states. So we're always going to have our current state, but you could have your future states or a historic state to learn where we've come from. You can have various working states, such as your staging architectures we've explored, or various project states. And also the analysis states. What if this? What if that? How do you want the different scenarios to play out? And you can compare those with your live environment. And it's worth bearing in mind that just because I've looked at a few in quite a confined area, you can actually do this as many times as you need. It's not just, I need one future state, I need one project state. You can build this out as much as you need to compare and contrast different scenarios, different states, to help you find intelligent advice and options to move your organizations forward. And that's everything from me. So Peter, I will pass on to you and let's go through some questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Nick. That was great. Both educational and entertaining, as always. So well done. Thank you for that. Indeed, for those of you that are new to the summit, you won't know this, but you may not be surprised to learn that Nick is actually one of our quiz masters. So we'll be hearing more from Nick when we do the quizzes tomorrow too. But anyway, but just for today's session, we've got another 10 minutes or so left in which we can tackle some of the questions that have come in. A couple of these I think might have kind of got answered a little bit as the demo went on. There was a question early on, what do the highlight colors mean in the catalogs?
Yep, yeah, no problem. So it's a good question. What they actually mean, so the green items, I can actually demonstrate this as I go. So this green item, it actually means if I click on this drop down, keep recommended. So this is Abacus saying, well, actually, you've made a change in, let's say we're in our current state, and let's bring up the current state architecture. The current state saying, well, you've made a change, and we think you should keep this change that you've made. It's different to one of the other states, but keep what you've got. You can change it, but it's a recommendation. The red items, however, are indicating that you should sync. It knows that it's out of date, so it's saying bring those items in. Purple, it's been quite candid with you and saying, well, I know there's a change. You've actually got to make this decision whether you accept the change or not. So it doesn't know if you should keep the existing one or the next one. So that's for a bit of human input to make that decision.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so another one. When comparing present to working states, can you sort the catalogue based on which values in the column have seen changes?
So can you get that
sort
one again?
The
Sorry, Peter.
Sort the catalogue based on which
yes.
values in the column have seen changes.
Very good question. Very good question. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close this item on here so I can just keep the catalogue open and bring out the applications once more. So the short answer is yes. What you are able to do though, rather than see everything as you can here, what you'll see is you can actually deselect the unchanged items. And what that will do is only show items that have been updated. It's worth pointing out though that it will only show the changes of the columns that are displayed. So if you do have any properties in addition that have been updated in a different catalog, that won't show in here. So this is only showing it based on the changes based on this current view. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, cool. Yes, indeed. Thank you for that then, Nick. Okay, another one. For the state changes in architecture, when you viewed the properties, it looked like it was showing anonymous as the modified by. Can we see who made the changes before syncing?
Good question. So in this particular view, the reason it will show anonymous is because I've basically worked on it without actually being logged in. So this is my own private environment. So you'll see where, if we look at here, this is actually saying modified by me. What you'll see is within Abacus, every time someone logs in, all of their changes, it's registered to themselves. So whether they make the changes in Abacus Studio or Enterprise, that user is actually basically a watermark, that they're not getting away with changing something and not having their name against it. So it's all traceable.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Thank you, Nick. Okay, a couple of quick fire ones, I think, here. So firstly, is there a limit to how many architectures I should have? E.g., should I have one for every project I'm working on?
So there's no out and out limit. One thing I'd be cautious of is just going overboard and creating a new architecture when the wind blows. They should be for a specific purpose. In the case of where you say one for every project that you're working on, that could well be valid. And that's something that actually the next presentation by Helsana is actually exploring. So that could actually be really useful to actually look at the different projects, how they're actually going to change your current state. So in that sense, it could be a viable use case.
Right, indeed. Well, at the heart of this, this question here, how do you create a copy of your current architecture?
Actually, a very good question. It's one that I haven't shown. Quite simply, really, it's a copy and paste, and I'm really underselling it there. But what we do is we right click on the architecture you want to have a copy of, and we simply evolve it. What that does, it's actually got a connection, so it keeps the sync target linked with your production architecture or whichever architecture you choose, and it will actually create it underneath here. It takes a few seconds. But it's basically taking a carbon copy of your existing architecture, and there you go. Production as is 0.1. Let's call it new project. I've now got a new architecture to work in, and that can be compared directly with my production state.
Cool. Well, look, a question that came in just now, which actually is about syncing changes, I think applies to what you've just shown there. Do you need to be an admin user to sync changes? I guess also to do as you've just done there.
Yeah, good question. So you don't need to be an admin user. What you do need, however, is if I go to manage users and groups, is to be in a group. So don't use this as best practice. This is just to enable me to work on this webinar. But if you look at the group, you'll see you've got different feature permissions. So basically you need to be in a group that has this enabled. Otherwise, you'll not be able to run the diff sync functionality.
Cool. Okay. A similar question to before. And indeed, as Nick has referred to, we do have a client presentation coming up shortly. So we'll have some actual experience from a customer outlining this. But the question is, how many, and in brackets, minimum to maximum states do some of your advanced customers typically have?
Ooh, good question.
At any moment in time?
Good question. So a few of our more advanced in maturity with Abacus, they've probably got around 20 architectures that they're actively working in. Obviously, that takes a fair bit of governance to manage, but they've got the team in place to actually manage that. So that's where we're looking at. It can creep up, but I think the average, more just to set an expectation of a lot of clients that we work with, probably looking at 6, 7, 8.
Okay, cool, good. Well, I'm going to go right back to the very first question that we had. Now, I think this sort of follows on. Are there some common analysis metrics to calculate in Abacus in analysis states?
Good question again. So what we actually have by default, all of these algorithms that I've got here, so we've got budget values, you've got those, what we can see on here, for example, criticality, the time ratings, all of these are standard out of the box metrics. We've got reliability, performance metrics, trying to remember them off my head, finance and life cycles, all of which can be calculated with all of these algorithms that come out of the box and can be found via our knowledge portal. So say, for example, you aren't using the Avolution framework, which is where these are all held within, you can actually download them from the knowledge portal. So hopefully that gives just a bit of a brief insight into the standard metrics that we provide. Hope I answered that one correctly.
Yes, indeed. But you know, one other question that's just come in is a sort of follow-on, or just to drill down into that. And I think we've just got time for this. What calculations are used to determine business fit or technical fit?
Yeah, another good question. So the business fit that we looked at before, it's actually got a level of weighting on it. So it's looking at the criticality, scores. It's looking at the number of users, and it's looking at the number of processes actually connected to a particular application. And I think it's also using the type to help define if it's just a support or actually key business use. Again, this algorithm actually has an explanation on the knowledge portal. So if you want to go into a bit more depth on it, we can share that link with you. But that will basically define the business fit. The technical fit is actually looking around the end of life dates of the technology that supports these applications. So these are all connected, we can see here, to platform services. So if this is actually connected to any out of date technology, so where we can see here, for example, Microsoft Access, the one that I've got, went out of date in January 2009, that is going to impact that technical fit score. Worth pointing out though, all of those scores, whilst we provide that calculation, you can amend them based on your own calculations. They don't need to be what we provide. It's just an example. So you can actually build that out to be business fit. The business fit can be what your business fit actually is.
Excellent. Nick, that's it. That's great. I think we've just about covered the majority of questions. There were one or two others that were overlapping with some of the others. So I think hopefully indirectly they'll have been answered too. So we have come to the end of the time. So let's pull up there. Thank you again very much for that, Nick. Thank you all for joining.